Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 Answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm with Louisa Sawyer Lindquist, the wonderful winemaker, president of Verdad Wines. A real treat to be here with Louisa because Verdad Wines, specializes in Spanish varieties. But Louisa, tell us a little bit more about Verdad, where you're located, and what you're doing.
Okay. Hi, Allison. Hi, everyone. So I started Verdad in 2000, and my original vision was to make Spanish varietal wines here on the beautiful Central Coast. I was inspired by my love of first Albariño and the lovely aromatic, crisp white wines produced in Rías Baixas and Galicia in Spain, and second by my love of, second and third love of rosé. I was always an avid rosé drinker since I was in my late 20s, and I just thought the wines were magical at capturing the whole feeling of summer and just a breezy, beautiful wines that have so many different expressions. And then Tempranillo, the wines of Rioja and Ribera del Duero have always been magical to me. And there's so many different expressions of Tempranillo all over Spain, but particularly in Rioja and Ribera del Duero, that I thought it would be really fun to make those wines. And I thought also that they were incredibly underrepresented in California, especially considering California's close ties to Spain and Mexico and the Spanish culture and being part of Spain at one point. And also the climate, the Mediterranean geographical features of California looks a lot like certain areas of Spain. So just always piqued my curiosity coming over to California from my native New York on wine visits, how there were no Spanish grapes to speak of planted here.
Yeah, it's always a dominance of French grapes.
Yes, French and Italian to some extent. And yeah, it was just like, what's going on here?
So where do you source your fruit from? Do you own any vineyards? Are you sourcing? And where did you find Spanish varieties, or did you have to plant them? Initially,
we had to plant them. We, at the moment, don't own any vineyards. We had originally a long-term lease at Ibarra Young Vineyard, and Bob, my husband Bob, of Lindquist Family Wines, formerly of Coupe, planted the Ibarra, grafted over and planted Ibarra Young Vineyard in the 80s. So he had been using that for Syrah, Mourvedre, Viognier, and Marsanne. And then before we got married, we planted some Albariño there. The cuttings, which we got from Brian Babcock, one of the major sources for Albariño, were these cuttings he took from Bodegas Morgadillo, with the permission of the winemaker at that time, Jose Antonio Lopez. And Brian brought back a bundle of Albariño cuttings. His friend worked for TWA Airlines, and his friend walked them through, which you could do in those days pre-9/11. And I believe he planted them around in the early 90s. So just a little planting. He made some wine, which I think he sold a little bit in his tasting room, but it was never a commercial wine for him. When we found out about that, we asked to buy cuttings from him, and we bought basically 150 sticks in 1996 and planted that at Ibarra Young. And then in 2005, took cuttings from Ibarra Young and planted that in the vineyard we had in Edna Valley called Sawyer Lindquist Vineyard. And we planted 2 acres there. Immediately we saw the Albariño was we can go on and on and on, but Tempranillo was a different story. That called around to local nurseries, and I believe it was Duarte Nursery supplied us with some Tempranillo budwood, which we planted, and so that was planted in 1999, and then a friend of ours brought cuttings from Bodegas Pesquera, and he got permission from Alejandro Fernandez to take cuttings. His name is Steve Ventrello. He worked for Classical Wines of Spain, and then he started a winery called Parador, also devoted to Spanish grape varieties, especially Tempranillo. So we bought the cuttings from Steve, from Pesquera, and planted a little bit at Albariño, and then we took cuttings from that planting and brought that into Edna Valley.
Wow.
Yeah.
So kind of cooler climate areas to a degree. Well, I mean, Albariño is in Santa Ynez in Los Olivos district? Or near?
Yes, it's Santa Ynez it's right on the border of Santa Ynez and Los Olivos. Next, right adjacent to where the Beckman family winery is.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And what's your total case production?
It's about 22,000, between 2,000 and 2,500. I've gone up a little bit above that. So that's what it is now.
And are you mostly like direct to consumer, or are you in different markets?
I'm in different markets, and I should add that in addition to Albariño, Rosé from Grenache or Garnacha, Tempranillo, I also make Cabernet, and that is starting to become actually a larger production wine than Tempranillo. And that's something that I'm planning on growing more. It's from organic grapes, certified grapes from Paso Robles, and I also have some grapes that I've wine in barrel that's from Santa Ynez near Happy Canyon.
So really covering the Central Coast.
Yes, exactly. Cabernet's a great grape, and it's very sturdy, and it just likes a lot of new wood, but it's been really fun to make it and work with it.
Yeah. So what is your first memory relevant to wine?
That's a good question. One of my first memories, when I got into wine, I took a year off between high school and college and worked in Yosemite. And a lot of my friends were older than me. And they were Californians, and they drank a lot of wine. So I remember hanging out and partying with them and really enjoying wine. And probably the magical setting helped a lot as well. But I was, in that kind of, I don't know what I should study and this or that. And somehow it occurred to me it would be really fun to study wine.
And so you did that.
I did that to a certain extent. I ended up going to Long Island University. There used to be an undergraduate campus in Southampton. And as I was in my senior year, I realized that there was a budding wine industry there. Mm-hmm. And I explored that, and I asked the administration at LIU if I could work at the first winery on Long Island, Grape Vineyard, and be kind of an intern there, and in exchange for college credit, and they agreed. So I got a semester that I did that full time.
And I know you got your start in Long Island, working in wineries there before you came out west. And you've obviously been in wine for a long time, and probably, I know you've had the pleasure and privilege to drink a lot of great wines in those years. Is there one wine that stands out? I'm sure there are many, but is there one that comes to mind as one of those aha moments? At some point, I don't know what the aha was. Maybe it was about a grape or a place or just a food pairing, or who knows. Or maybe it was just the setting of the people and place.
Well, there's been a few moments like that, I have to say. Gosh, it's tough because I've been so lucky and so fortunate to be exposed to some of the greatest wines in the world throughout my varied career, I worked for a distributor importer in New York. I worked for a very fine wine shop in New York where we did Bordeaux futures, so I got to taste first growth Bordeaux. And I went to after I moved to San Francisco in 92, I decided to go to the wine experience in New York for the first time. And I'd been in the business at that point for a while. I don't know how many years, but so the New York wine experience at that time was really exciting, and I'm sure it still is. I haven't been for a number of years, but went around diligently tasting, if not to every table, certainly a lot of tables, especially the imported wines. And I tasted a 76 JJ Prune Auslese, and that was a revelation of absolute beauty and incredible wines. There was also, I think it was at that point, maybe an 86, but a good, of Louis Latour Corton Charlemagne, which was a beautiful wine that stood out to me very nicely. A few years before that, I had been at one of the Lauber tastings. They used to do it at the Marriott Marquis in New York, and I was working for them, and I was a new sales rep, and the instructions were go around to each table and introduce yourself and taste one or two wines that, so our portfolio, and you say hello, and I'd been tasting probably and mingling for over an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I tasted Vietti Barbaresco. And it was, I think, again, in like the 86 vintage probably. And it's a vineyard that starts with a B. But it was a revelation in Italian wines from Piemonte that it just was absolutely mind-blowing.
It's like all these revelations, like every time to taste wines of those caliber, and then, I can't imagine. You could probably go on and on, like all the great wines. Like,
it's ridiculous. And I haven't covered Spanish wines yet.
So if we were to come to your home, you make a lot of wine, your husband makes a lot of wine, you're exposed to a lot. What would we find in your home? Is it a lot of your own wines or local wines? Is it wines from around the world? Are there certain grapes? What's in your house?
Oh, a little bit of everything. We tend to drink more white wine because we'll have that as an aperitif, and depending on what we're cooking, we'll either have a white or a red or a pink. So right now, one of the wines we had recently while traveling was Crocker Pinot Gris, and we were in Hawaii visiting friends and working the market, and we stopped at a restaurant for an appetizer, and a friend of ours lives there in Maui and said, you have to try this wine, I love it. And it was the Crocker Pinot Gris, and it was delicious. So when I came home, I was just cruising the internet, and there was a special at wine.com, buy 6 bottles, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm buying that. But yeah, a lot of European wines, although it's hard, there's not a lot of shops here that carry a great selection necessarily. Usually we try to zero in on something and get it through a wholesaler friend of ours or two, or
It's good having connections.
exactly. But we love that wines from Alsace. We love Albariño, of course. We went on recently a Godello kick where we tried a lot of different Godello. We also try and we drink a lot of wines from our colleagues here on the Central Coast. And I have to say, I'm always impressed with the balance and finesse that the vineyards, the wines made from the vineyards on the Central Coast produce.
Yeah. Anything you opened up this week that drank really well?
Gosh, I have to think. You have to give me a minute to think about that. Here at the winery, every day you'll see we have a staff lunch where we sit down and we open anywhere from 6 to 10 to 15 wines, depending if we have guests or not. And so we, there's always some of ours there just to kind of check in and see how they're showing. And then we usually have other things. So
it all blurs.
I know, it does. And I need to, anyways, one of the things that we had recently that was really delicious was the Pinot Gris Pinot Blanc from from Aubon Clement, which is lovely. We had recently, I'm just thinking something that really struck in my mind, a lovely Syrah from El Lugar.
Ooh.
And he's a friend of ours, and really delicious. I could go on and on. But
Well, so with all these different grapes, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
I think there's perfect spots for different grape varieties depending on the vineyard situation. So, yeah.
And then another thing is you're drinking all these great wines from around the world, a lot of very famous names and well-regarded wines that have been critically lauded. And I'm curious what your opinion is on wine critics and scores. Obviously, you're drinking wines that have gotten great scores. I'm sure you've submitted your wines over the years.
Mm-hmm.
How do they work for you as a brand and also as a consumer?
That's a tough question. It's over the years you realize that there's some critics who might have a similar palate to yours, or who might like and understand more nuanced wines, which I feel that we make here just because of the climate and the weather and the grapes that we use. Those are copacetic. I remember meeting Clive Coates years ago at a dinner in Burgundy, and I love the way he reviewed his wines because it was good, very good, very good indeed. If you really,
That's how I want to start reviewing wines.
I know. I think that's a great way to do it. And the thing, as you realize after time in the business and experiencing tasting wines, that wines can go through an evolution, and sometimes they're quite closed, especially with high acid wines. And if you taste the wine, you might not get anything or much out of the aromatic profile, etc. And a year later, it could be a revelation. So I think it's an imperfect system. It's good, and certainly I look at that if I'm buying on a site that posts these things. But it's just hard to say. Some reviewers are known for having palates, the bigger the better. And those publications, have their followings, but our wines don't do well in those, and that's okay. It's interesting also to me to see that there's a stylistic revolution going on from the big, bold wines of the late 90s, early 2000s to much more delicate, nuanced wines that are really, I start to see people really appreciating them.
Yeah, so for someone who hasn't had the privilege to taste Verdad wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on? I know you've talked about nuance and obviously Spanish varieties. Is there anything else?
They're definitely, I would call, have bright profiles. The Albariño has great acidity, minerality, aromatics. The Tempranillo is from some of the cooler climates in California. Maybe Edna Valley might have been the coolest climate the Tempranillo is planted in California. And then even the Cabernet I make, half of it is from Whale Rock Vineyard, and that's a limestone vineyard in the Templeton Gap, which is the coolest AVA in Paso Robles. And that lends its incredible freshness to the Cabernet. So people taste that wine and they're like, oh my God, this is not like a Paso Cab. This is completely different. It's fresh and this and focus and elegant. And so I think you do get that with my wines. You get a certain restraint.
So if space aliens were to land at your property and knock at your tasting room door on the slow coast, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Oh, I think rosé. Grenache rosé, because everybody likes rosé, and it could probably goes with alien food as well.
Well, so I have a question, and I want to talk to you about food in a second, but I have a question because I always ask, like, getting down as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé. Is it fair to say rosé is your choice?
Well, certainly, I feel that is the most. What's the word I'm looking for? Versatile wine, thank you. of any wine. It's got attributes of white and red, and it can match up to meat or just have it as an aperitif. I had a beautiful one yesterday when we were out to dinner, the Terre Brune from Bandol, and that wine is just absolutely gorgeous. So yes, I love rosé.
And so speaking of, food, you're drinking all these great wines, and as you said, you do lunches and you're opening up bottles of wine. Do you follow any rules when it comes to pairing food and wine? Do you look for any certain things to make the choices, or do you just put wines on the table and have fun?
A little bit of both. If I'm entertaining or have a special bottle, I'll try to work around the food around the bottle to bring out the best of that. So, yeah.
Are there things? What are you looking for? Are you looking to match things or contrast things, or do you follow certain rules?
Well, I like. Yes, I think. If you're doing pasta or something with a tomato-based sauce, it is amazing how Italian wines and Tuscan wines are really able to match that well.
The high acid and low tannin.
Yes, and the freshness. But, I tend to gravitate towards maybe less tannic reds. We do a lot of grilling, but... and then, we don't eat a lot of meat, but we do enjoy it on occasion. Mm-hmm. And that's when we break out the Tempranillo and the Big Syrah and things, Cabernet Sauvignon, of course.
So getting into kind of winemaking, and you've been doing this for a long time, and you're working with you focus on Spanish varieties, but obviously with Lindquist family wines, you work together with Rhone grapes and other grapes. I'm curious, you're working with different vineyards along the Central Coast. We know there's vintage variation from year to year, but in your experience, have you seen more commonality, or do you see variation from year to year?
Definitely a variation from year to year, and maybe it's become a little more varied over the last 5 years or so. I've noticed a little more extremes. Actually starting with 17, when San Luis Obispo Labor Day weekend was the hottest place on earth, hotter than Afghanistan. 115 at that point was a record on the coast, just a few miles away from the coast, and that blew me away. We normally get a heat wave right around Labor Day. It's almost like clockwork. We'll have a cool, foggy, as you see, overcast summer. And then Labor Day weekend, it's like the fog is peeled away and the sunshine comes in, often with a bang. But we have had, it was 17 was super, had that extended heat wave. Again, in 20, there was some heat events, more than one, that affected all the vineyards on the Central Coast to some degree or another. And then in 22, it was just the most difficult, challenging, weather-wise vintage that I've ever experienced, and I believe I'm not the only winemaker that would say that.
Huh. So are there any signs or predictors you look for that are going to tell you what a vintage is going to be like?
Well, I've been fooled many times into thinking that, we've barely had any sunshine for the past 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. There was a couple hours yesterday morning, a couple the other afternoon, and I think, and it's been gray, a June gloom, cold, and then you get and we're over a month behind after a cold, wet winter. So you can easily get tricked into thinking like, oh, harvest is going to be late, but then you'll get a heat event and everything will equalize. Right now, I'd say it should be a cool late vintage, but
who knows? Mother Nature has her own way.
Exactly.
So I know that you make your wines at Bon Clément in the Santa Maria Valley. You're based out in the Slow Coast. That's where your tasting room is. You guys have a lot of traditions here. As you said, here you do lunch every day as a team?
It's pretty much Monday through Friday and usually Saturday during harvest.
Which is great. So do you have any other good luck rituals or traditions that you do at the start of harvest?
No, not really. We do have a winemaker here, Michael Brughelli, who brings the priest in to bless his vintage and the first grapes he brings in, which is really a neat tradition.
Then maybe it spreads over to the rest of the grapes.
Exactly. Hoping he shares the blessing with all of us.
And I'm wondering, this might sound like a silly question, when you go into the vineyards and you spend time in the vines, and then I know you're sourcing the different fruit, but when you bring it in here and it's in the barrel and it's your baby now, are you known for talking to your wine or communicating with it?
I think last year I was cursing at it.
So yes.
Yes.
It gets a reprimand sometimes.
Right, tough love, we call it. Yes, yeah. It's, it is interesting though when you have a vintage where it's even and the ripening is calm and everything is kind of relaxed and chill, and the weather hits all the right notes, that usually the resulting grapes do make exceptional wine, and there are vintages that you just know from the beginning are going to stand out, and as long as you don't screw it up, the wine should be pretty special.
Yeah, no talking to it because it behaves. So you were telling me at the beginning that you kind of were introduced to wine when you were in end of high school type thing, and you chose wine as a career path earlier than many people do. But when you were a little girl, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A forest ranger. Or a fashion model, but I've clearly not designed it like that.
Fashion model, forest ranger. I love it. And when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time today?
I like to hike and walk. I like films. I like to read a lot. I love to cook. Travel is a huge important part of my life as well. And after the pandemic, I really appreciate times I have with friends, and so I like to keep up relationships with my friends and family as much as possible.
And you were talking also about how, you'll usually start out with a white wine, and then if you have meats, go into red wine, and, you and Bob drink a lot of really good wines. But if you were going to set a romantic evening, your kid's graduating from college, there's time to celebrate, relax, it's just the two of you. What sort of wines do you open to make for a romantic evening and not just an average night? Or maybe every night's romantic because you open so many wines.
Well, so this is good timing. Yesterday we celebrated our anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. So we went out to dinner, and I guess Bob would be the romantic one here because he bought a lot of 97s. And we bought some together, he bought some, and so last night we had the 1997 Chateau Reyes and celebrated our anniversary at a dinner at a local wonderful restaurant called Ember, and it was magical, and the wine was phenomenal, and it really was a beautiful evening.
I love it. So romantic evenings are met with wines of significance.
Yes. Are fun wines too.
So Lisa, I'm wondering, we're all given advice throughout our lives from, teachers and parents to mentors. I'm wondering if there's a piece of advice someone gave you along the way that you try to live or work by.
Always have a sense of humor, and really never let it get you down too much, where you just got to get up and put one foot in front of the other when times are tough. And luckily, my husband and partner is a natural optimist, and always believes that the outcome will be fine and good. So that's helpful.
Yeah. So, when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Oh, let's see. I guess just getting a label on the bottle it was pretty amazing to me. Planting our vineyard felt great, although the capital expense was higher than we anticipated, and the ongoing expense is certainly a lot to take very seriously. Sometimes just making a wine that you're absolutely proud and excited about is there's nothing better than that feeling of feeling like it actually it worked. Everything kind of was right, and I feel like my wines are good and qualitatively or consistently good, but it's only once every few years that you really are spellbound by a special wine, and I'm always very proud about that and lucky.
So imagine a scenario. We're sitting at a table here and we've got your bottles of wine on the table, but there's an empty seat next to you. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to share a bottle of Verdad wines with?
Oh, Allison. Oh, that would be a tough one. I don't know. I have to think about that, really. Winston Churchill would be fun.
And he was a drinker.
And he loved to drink, so he would be a lot of fun to meet and to share some wine with. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. See, I told you there'd be some silly questions. That's all I warned you with. Complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A table without wine is like a bread without butter or olive oil.
Covering all bases there. I love it. And then we're almost finished. Got just 2-3 more quick little fun questions. One is, if you were being sent off to a deserted island and could only take 3 wines with you, with all the great wines you drink and have drunk and love, what 3 wines would you pick if you could only take 3?
I would take, obviously this is an unlimited budget.
Yes.
I would take the Taittinger Comte de Champagne Rosé would be one. Oh gosh, I'd have to say I'd take a Mauro Tempranillo, or they're right outside of Verdad del Duero, one of their higher level blends, which are beautiful wines. And then, oh gosh, for white wine, oh gosh, it's just too hard. I'd want something that's, there's some wines that are really special and full-bodied and, very satisfying when you have a bottle once in a while. And there's some things that you want to drink all the time. And,
I know. So many choices.
So many choices. Gosh, almost tempted to do a rosé because it goes with so many
Why
things. Let's see. Give me a minute. Being on an island, I'd have to say I might want to load up on some of that Bandol rosé that we had as an aperitif last night.
Yeah.
That was spectacular.
There you go. So, We're almost finished, but it is time for a little game where we pair wine with music.
Okay.
Not to stress you too much.
All right.
But based on, we'll keep it easy. We're going to focus on your 3 wines that you make. Well, you make 4, but I'll focus on your Spanish varieties. So I want to start with your Albariño.
Okay, I would say that would be a wine for some good country.
Ooh.
Maybe like Loretta Lynn or Dolly Parton music.
Ooh.
Something fun and great stories and just
Not what I would expect, but I like that. And your Rosé of Garnacha.
That would be a definitely more of a let's see, what would be a perfect Grenache? Probably some some, I'm trying to think, celebratory, some kind of high energy jazz, but fun jazz, not something that you have to, like if you go into a club, people are going to tell you to be quiet.
And your Tempranillo.
Tempranillo's got to be bossa nova. So.
Love it. I love it. Not what you might expect. Well, Louisa, you've been great, and I know that put a lot of pressure on you to do the music. So this should be an easy 2-part question. Okay. The first part is, what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to go explore?
That I haven't been to yet?
Or maybe return to. It's up to you.
Oh, wow. Well, I've never been to Bordeaux, and it turns out our youngest son is going to do his last semester in college at the University of Bordeaux. So I'm excited to have that opportunity finally to visit there. And another for white wine is the area of Galicia where Godello is planted, and I have not been there, and I feel like I'm dying to go there. Dying to go.
So 2 places at the top of your bucket list. And if our listeners wanted to come find you, take a trip up the coast, come to, or down the coast, or out to the coast, depending on where they're coming from, you're in the Slow Coast, and where can they find you, and how can they find your wines?
Well, we have a tasting room in Arroyo Grande. It's right now at, what is the address? It's right in the village, the old village of Arroyo Grande. We're moving locations, so by the middle to end of August, we'll be just at another location in the village of Arroyo Grande. And you can look us up at www.verdadwines and lindquistfamily.com, and we can tell you how to get our wines.
Wonderful. Well, Louisa, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. It's been fun chatting with you, and I'm ready to go taste some of your wines.
Great. I can't wait. Thank you, Allison. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.